Morning, guys. I'm going to make an attempt to run through this question from 2016, number 1. I think this is a really good example of kind of what you're up against. And while there's a little bit of graphing this one, which they will not make you do, it's still a good example because of the various calculations that they're going to make you do within supply and demand. To me, this seems like a question that is very probable that you'll have to do. So, taking a quick look at the question, we're looking at the market for bananas, muffins, and coffee. They're all interrelated, and each market is perfectly competitive. So in letter A, then, what they're asking you to do is take a look at the graph, and then it says $1 a pound and 1,000 pounds. Suppose the government puts a price floor. Okay, so we know that they've given you these numbers. They don't say to draw anything, but we know the good rules are when in doubt, graph it out. So I've taken the liberty here of drawing the graph for you already. So we have our equilibrium of $1 here, and we have our equilibrium quantity of 1,000. The question then says, would this floor result in a shortage, a surplus, or neither, and explain. Well, the floor is binding because it is above equilibrium price. It's going to stop price from falling down to equilibrium, and as a result, this will result in a surplus, because what you're going to see then is that the quantity demanded is going to be less than the quantity supplied. You can see that right here. The quantity demanded is less than the quantity supplied. So that is a surplus, and that's your explanation right there. So now here in part 2, it says calculate the price elasticity of supply when this changes. Then it asks us between $1.20 and $1, is the supply elastic, inelastic, explain. Okay, so in order to do this, what we have to do is our formula. And so without further ado, let's do this. We have our percentage change of quantity supplied divided by percentage change in price. And that equals your outcome here. And so in order to do this, then what we're going to have to do is the math. The quantity supplied increased to 1,500 from 1,000. So that was a change of 500 over the original 1,000. That means on top over here we have a 50% over whatever the change in price was. Change in price, we know, went from $1 to $1.20. So that means then that is a change of 20 of the original dollar. That is 20%. So that means we have 50% over 20%. That means that this is 2.5, right? So that means this is 2.5. That's your elasticity of supply there. And then in order to finish this problem, it says calculate, which we just did, show your work, which I did, and then it wants to know, is it unit elastic, elastic, or inelastic, and then explain. And so the explain is actually very easy. All you have to do is say that because the number is greater than 1, it is elastic. When the elasticity of demand is greater than 1, we know, I'm sorry for my bad handwriting there, when the elasticity of demand is greater than 1, we know that we are relatively elastic. That's your answer there as well. So now, letter B says, draw a correct label graph marker. We said we're not going to have to draw. Okay, and so then it says on the graph, show the impact of an increase in the price of bananas on the muffin market. Now see, instead of on the graph, or instead of draw, they might say state, or if this is the case, what happens. That means you might need to use graphs to come to your proper solution. So looking at letter B, then, what you can see is that I drew a basic graph here. They're not going to ask you to do that. What they're asking you to do is they're going to ask you to state what happens as a result of the change in the price of an input here. So that's what we're going to do here. It says on the graph that we drew. Now we're not going to be drawing a graph on the AP exam, so it'll say state what the impact of an increase in the price of bananas is on the muffin market. Now, the pertinent thing that matters here for us is that bananas are an input for muffins. And so, if bananas are inputs, ladies and gentlemen, what that means is that this is a supply shifter. Remember, we have tribe, these are our shifters of demand. And then what we learned then is that we have the acronym TESTES. TESTES are our shifters of supply. Inputs shift supply. Is this good or bad for muffins if the price of bananas go up? If the price of bananas go up, that is bad for muffins, because that means it's going to be more expensive to produce. That means the supply of muffins is going to shift to the left, and what we see is that the equilibrium price of muffins is going to have to go up, and the quantity available of muffins is going to have to go down. They'll probably ask you something along those lines. It says labeling the new market price and quantity. You see what I mean? But they're not going to ask you to do that. They'll say state what happens to price and equilibrium. And as you can see in our example, the price went up and the quantity available went down. I think those are reasonable questions. Okay, letter C. Letter C says, in the market for coffee, equilibrium price is $3 and the equilibrium quantity is 100 cups. The cross price elasticity with respect to muffins is -2. Okay, are the coffee and muffins normal, inferior, complementary? Okay, so we have to then understand that this number right here is what we call cross price elasticity, and we have to know what it means. And so taking a quick look then at something I set up here for you. If the price of something goes up and then the quantity demanded of the other good goes up, that means then that these are substitutes. Price of beef goes up, that means we buy more. If the price of beef goes up, that means we buy more pork. That means they're substitutes. You see, the arrows are going in the same direction. This is a positive number, a positive correlation. They're substitutes. However, in our problem, they tell us we have a negative number. And so that means then the price of good A went up. That means we're now buying less of the other good. That means then, ladies and gentlemen, that these things are what we call complementary goods, because we're no longer buying them. So these goods are complements, and that is your answer to letter C1. C2 says now assume that the supply of coffee is perfectly elastic using equal price and quantity given above. Draw a correct label graph. They're not going to ask you to draw that graph, ladies and gentlemen. I drew it here to show you what they would have expected of you. And the point here is that they want to see of the coffee market, right? And so you might have to make notes of this in order to answer what they really want you to do, which was this question here, which is the number 3 here. Taking a quick look here, it says, given the original quantity of 100 cups of coffee per week, if the increase in the price of muffins is 10%, calculate the new equilibrium quantity for the coffee market and show your work. This is not that bad. In order to do this, you have to remember your formula for cross-price elasticity. And so cross-price elasticity, when we take a quick look at what I've got for you here, cross-price elasticity is as follows right here. It tells us that the formula is percentage change in quantity demanded of good A divided by the percentage change in price of good B. Okay, so the percentage change in price of good B was 10%. They just loud and clear told you that. That means that the 10% goes on bottom, right? And we know that the cross-price elasticity is -2, and they're looking for X. They want to know, calculate the new equilibrium quantity. That means they want this number on top. This is a little hard, this question. You would have had to understand that they were looking for this number on top. But if you look at the algebra that we have here, we just multiply both sides by 10%, and that means X equals -20%. And so that means then what they were asking then is calculate the new quantity, right? That's the hard part here. If X is -20%, the question then becomes, what does that mean to our graph? So your answer is -20%. And so let's look at the quantity that we were given. We started at 100. Again, they said that it changes by -20%. If we started with 100, what's -20%? That means this thing would come over. Here's your new demand curve. This stays $3, and then this number right there has got to be 80. because negative 20% off of 100 means it reduces by 20. That makes that number 80. I think I got a little convoluted there, but at the same time, it was pretty straightforward. I suspect this is the kind of stuff that you're going to be up against on the AP exam. If anybody has any questions over anything that I did here, please post on the webpage, on the Google Classroom. If there's anything I can do to help you, please, please, please email me or message me. I hope this made sense to you, and I hope you guys are having a glorious, glorious afternoon. Take care.